Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Zee Cohen-Sanchez, Executive Director of Soul Strategies. Zee, thanks so much for coming on once again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
As we sit here right now, less than 2 weeks away from Election Day, I want to talk about the state you're in, which is Nevada, showing former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris in a dead heat. When you see that data, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so Nevada is definitely a state where, there was a lot of assumptions at the beginning of the election cycle that we would sway more blue, even though we did have a pretty rough cycle last cycle where we did lose some pretty critical seats. But it looks like we are definitely heading in a direction of being either in a dead heat or even lean red. So what people really need to consider about the state of Nevada is that we are really vast here. It's everybody assumes that we're just Vegas and Reno, but there is a lot more to the state than just Vegas and Reno. And some of those more rural places, Pahrump, Laughlin, I mean, there's so many, cities that are not necessarily massive population zones, but certainly not small towns. And those towns are pushing us very, very far to the right.
Talk to us about that a little bit. What do you think that the national media is missing when it comes to these conversations about Nevada, about those voters in this really crucial battleground state?
Yeah, I think that again, it's always the assumption that we are Las Vegas. And Vegas still, is, I mean, yes, it is, we have a lot of our population in Las Vegas, but it is, still not going to be enough to carry the state. What I think a lot of presidential candidates have done in the past, which they need to change, is stop only coming to Las Vegas because, there's so much out there. And I know it is really, really difficult to get to some of those places, but, those places need to be talked to. I mean, those folks in rural Nevada or really anywhere outside of Las Vegas are struggling financially, and they want to see more people paying attention to them. So yes, it is definitely a shame that they're moving further to the right, but also it's part of our responsibility to get out to them. I mean, most of those people have probably never seen a presidential candidate in their lives come out to visit.
Usually, when people move one way or another, it's because certain issues are driving them in the way of a certain party. Why do you think voters in Nevada specifically are moving more right?
I think it's really because we have a lack of education. Our education here in Nevada is some of the worst in the nation. I believe last time I checked, we were like 47 out of 50 states for education, which is a huge, huge issue. Also, what we see is we have a lot of people that are further right that move from neighboring states like California, like Utah, all of these places, and they sort of shift their way into Nevada. We do have the benefit of being a tax-free state, so that, we do drive a lot of business owners, people like that to move here. But again, it's not enough because we have a lot of people that move here because they're financially struggling. And so ignoring that population, and we've seen with Donald Trump, for example, and now Kamala Harris saying the no tax on tips. But again, no tax on tips will only appeal to Las Vegas voters because those are the people that are working in the casinos and in tip jobs. Most of these other folks that are in these smaller towns like Pahrump, Laughlin, places like that, Winnemucca, they're not worried about no tax on tip policy. So we need to get a lot better, both the Democrats and the Republicans, at talking to those voters and talking about what really matters to them, which is definitely going to be the cost of living.
The cost of living, how much your groceries are, inflation are all key issues facing voters, especially voters in battleground states and especially voters in Nevada. So within the next 2 weeks, what do you want to see, particularly as a Democrat, from the Harris campaign?
Yeah, we have to talk about the cost of groceries, and we have to do it in a way. I'm so passionate about talking about this because I've been talking about it for the whole cycle, but we have to talk to them about what they can understand, right? When we start bringing up things like tariffs and we start bringing these things up, people don't know what these things mean in the context of their personal lives, right? So you can say the word tariff, and to somebody, they might just look up online and see what a tariff is, but what does that mean to the person that's going into the grocery store? Because the reality is that the tariffs are not going to be helping them. And Donald Trump keeps pushing it, saying, oh, the companies are going to pay more because of the tariffs. They're not going to. That percentage tax always ends up on the consumer. And so, but we're not talking about it in a way that they can understand that. And we have to start doing that because Trump is doing that so well here in Nevada. If you look around my town, for example, I live in a small town outside of Las Vegas. We're a 50-50 split town. And just last week, they started putting up signs all over our town saying, Kamala, gas prices high, Trump gas prices low. I mean, it's that simple, right? So we need to start doing the same thing on the Dem side.
I was born and raised in a battleground state, Pennsylvania, and the economy is the top issue there. And when I talk to voters in Pennsylvania specifically, their big concerns are grocery prices, like in Nevada, as you're saying. And let's say a voter says, well, my grocery prices were less under Trump than Biden. My cost of living was less 4 years ago. I was financially better off 4 years ago under Trump. What do you say to them this close to the election?
Yeah, and that's the battle that we have, is what do we say this, because it is a complicated issue, right? And really it's not because Trump was in office. That's what we have to continue to ride to them and ride home, is that it is not because Trump was in office. We can't always just look at the person that's the sitting president and assume that they have the power to control things like grocery prices, or they have the power. I hear all the time people talking about, oh, well, there were no wars under Trump, right? That's not because of Trump being in office, right? That's just because, well, first of all, there were wars under Trump, but even if there weren't in some scenario, it's not because he was sitting in office. So we have to start looking more critically at what the presidential candidates can and can't do. And that really goes back to education, right? We need to educate our voters. And this isn't a new thing. We've had to educate voters since the beginning of time. So it's not like we can just say, oh, our hands are thrown up, we can't do anything. We can get out there and we can run education campaigns. But what we have to continue to tell them is that the grocery prices are because of corporate price gouging. And Kamala Harris has got a solid plan to stop corporate price gouging. And all Trump wants to do is make sure that corporations continue to price gouge, because those are his donors, right? Those are the people that are making sure that he continues on this journey. Kamala Harris is going to get her prosecutor hat on, and she's going to make sure that they are not going to be able to do that.
As you and I have discussed for the past couple of months now, and especially now as we are down to the final days here, we are down to the wire. This election's coming down to those 7 battleground states, Nevada obviously being one of them. And it's going to come out to turnout. It's going to come out to convincing those swing voters, those voters who are undecided, to vote for one party or the other. So how is the Democrats' ground game in Nevada, specifically the Harris campaign? How visible are they?
We are definitely visible. I will give the campaign that. The campaign has had canvassers out every single day. But again, we aren't focusing in on the places that I think that we need to. And that's something that I hope that the campaign will shift their direction, but also it is a matter of resources, right? And all campaigns don't have unlimited resources, especially at this point in the game. So I know that they're definitely going to have to be strategic about picking and choosing the places where they know that they're going to have enough population density, enough volunteers, enough paid folks on the ground. But ultimately, this is a different type of election. We've never had an election like this where we've been this tight, right? The polls are the tightest that we've ever seen them. So we need to make decisions based off that, which is going to be a little bit different from our traditional ground game type decisions that we make this close out. We really, a lot can happen in the last 2 weeks here. And if we can get out to those smaller places and we can talk to those undecided voters, and we can start really community networking, which is a big part of Kamala's plan, with her ground game, then I do think that we can shift some of those voters. Because as we see, we're 48-48 right now. Like, this is a true moment of every single vote counts.
I want to talk about an important demographic, especially Nevada, and that's Latino votes. Latino support for Harris is smaller than Latino support for Biden in 2020, and that's particularly true with Latino men. A recent poll from USA Today, Suffolk University, found male Latino voters aged 18 to 49 support Trump over Harris. Why do you think that is, and how do you think she can, change the tide there in the next 2 weeks?
Yeah, this is such an interesting topic, Latino voters, especially male voters with Trump. And I think Paula Ramos, who's a great reporter, just did an incredible book on this that I can't wait to read. I think it's called Defactors. And she really looks at like the psychology of the Trump Latino voter. And what I've seen just from videos on her book, as I said, I haven't gotten the chance to read it yet, is that there's a lot of this internalized me versus them mentality, because a lot of these folks did come over here. Some of them came over the border. Some people came undocumented, right? And have really sort of grounded themselves, have become citizens and have grounded themselves in this American dream. And so having that, this sort of internal struggle of, I'm an American. I'm not a Latino. I'm an American, and that's different, right? It's a big struggle, and it's a struggle that Trump speaks to better than any candidate I've ever seen in my lifetime, right? But a really dangerous narrative, because at the same time, that sort of othering of, I don't want to be a Latino, I'm an American, is where we see them go further and further to the right, and that's a problem I think we're going to have to sort of face. It's not going to be something we're going to fix in this election cycle, but I hope it's something that we'll fix over a longer period of time.
So how do you think Democrats should counter that messaging?
Yeah, so I think that we really need to talk about inclusivity and what it means to be an American. I think that that's something that we don't talk about very often, especially in a melting pot that we are. We focus very much on just the word American, but like, what does that actually mean, right? That actually means that you could be from anywhere. I mean, you could have come here when you were 16 years old and you could be a dreamer, or you could have been a, 6, 7 generation American. But either way, what we need to start talking about is that we are all American. And that's what makes us such an amazing country and such a different country, is that we have such diversity, and we need to celebrate that diversity. We don't need to, there doesn't need to be this sort of understanding of, oh, just because you came here in this way, or just because you are this race, that you need to other yourself from your roots. You can still be American and you can still be Latino.
I want to now zoom out and talk about the Harris campaign as a whole. She has a very interesting person campaigning with her, and that person is conservative former Congresswoman Liz Cheney. During her time in Congress, she voted with Trump 90% of the time, over 90% of the time. So is Liz Cheney, who endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris, is she the type of person, as a Democrat, you want to see campaigning and aligning with Harris because of just how conservative her record is?
Yeah, it's, Liz Cheney is such an interesting diversion, I think, in this election cycle. I think it's good. I think overall, if you ask if it's good or bad, I think it is a good thing, because I think that we need more people to say, we need to put parties aside and we need to put our country first. And I think that's one thing. If I could say one good thing about Liz Cheney, that's what I would say about her, is that she is that type of politician that she will always put her country first. And I think there's something to be said about that. Her record is dicey, to say the least. But I do think that she has seen the danger of Donald Trump. She's recognized that, and she's on the path forward to fix that. What she's done in her past, I hope that this also changes her perspective of Democrats. I do. Will it? I don't know. Will her record continue the way it is? Maybe it will. But I do think that she is making the effort to put forward her best foot forward in this moment in history, which is good.
Donald Trump certainly didn't have a nice thing to say about Liz Cheney after seeing this, and I want to read what he posted and then get your reaction. He posted this. Arab voters are very upset that Comrade Kamala Harris, the worst vice president in the history of the United States and a low IQ individual, is campaigning with dumb as a rock war hawk Liz Cheney, who, like her father, the man that pushed Bush to ridiculously go to war in the Middle East, also wants to go to war with every Muslim country known to mankind. Let's take the obvious name calling out of this. But to his point, do you think this is going to isolate Muslim and Arab voters even further away from Vice President Kamala Harris?
It's a possibility. Although in saying that, I think that Harris, what's more difficult, I think, for Kamala in this moment is the whole war on Gaza, right? The war between Israel and Gaza. I think a lot of young voters, particularly in Michigan, I hope that they do come out and vote for her. I do. But I do think if they don't, that will be the reason why they didn't. And I think that the sort of struggle of this is that Donald Trump has not been better on this issue at all. He's been worse. I mean, in fact, he said that Israel should finish the job, right? But still, even with that, I don't necessarily think those voters will go out and vote for Trump, but I do think that they won't vote. And that is just as big of a problem, to be perfectly honest, and something that as a Democratic Party, and I know that Kamala has come out and she has said things like she believes that we need a ceasefire. She's, sided with Bernie Sanders on that issue, but Bernie Sanders has been the only Democrat I've seen, at least, that is at least as high up as he is in the Democratic Party, that has been speaking out against this in a really strong way. And I think if Kamala had gotten on that train, it could be a good thing for her. But also, I do know that she's in a tough situation because she has to balance the Jewish vote in a lot of these swing states. So, it's a tough issue. It's a really tough issue.
We are down to the wire, as we've been saying, less than 2 weeks out from Election Day, and there are 6 electoral votes on the line in Nevada. So what do you want to see as a Democrat between now and November 5th?
I want to see as many people out knocking doors as we possibly can. I know that a lot of folks have come out and they've said that, voting is great and we need you to do that, but we also need you to get out and we need you to volunteer. We need you to make phone calls. We need you to knock doors. What is so wonderful about the Democratic Party and so wonderful about Kamala Harris's campaign is how many people are excited to get out there and vote. This is not, and I know that a lot of people have tried to compare this to a Hillary Clinton campaign. This is not a Hillary Clinton campaign. That I can tell you on the ground. Hillary Clinton did not have nearly the support in terms of volunteers that Kamala Harris has had, nor the excitement around her campaign. So as many, my hope is for these last few weeks that on Election Day, we can sit down and say, we did everything in our power as Democrats to get over the finish line. Whether we win or lose, we can confidently say that we couldn't have made one more phone call. We couldn't have knocked one more door. That to me will be a victory.
Well, there's certainly a lot to look out for between now and then, and I hope you continue to come on and break it down with me. Zee Cohen-Sanchez, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Brittany.